Welcome to Avoice, a voice for creators. I'm your host, Daniel Norton. In this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about a situation I think many of us have as creators, which is when do we step away from the creation process just to enjoy life? We've also got a great review, and I'll talk a little bit about how you guys can get your voice on the show at the end. So stick around and let's talk. Speaking of reviews, one of the best things you can do to support this podcast is to rate and review it on your favorite podcast app. That's how we get into the algorithm and more people can see it. This is super important for new and small podcasts like this one. So if you are enjoying the content, please take a second to give me a rating, ideally 5 stars, and a review if you can. And we're going to read a great review at the end. But first, let's talk about creating and living. Let's talk a little bit about capturing versus living in the moment. What I mean by this is when we are creators, whether it be video or stills is mostly what I'm going to talk about here. I think this is where it's maybe a little more relevant, but also people who are on social, right? You're a social creator, you are an influencer or whatever. The idea that you've always got to be on and always creating, but not just for yourself, but for an audience. The thing is, we love to create, right? That's why we're here. That's what we're doing. I'm assuming most people listening to this are on some form or another creators, whether you'll be doing it professionally or you are doing it for the love of it, or ideally both if you're professional. And when we are asked, right, I've had this conversation with people before. It's like, I'm going to this party. Oh yeah, they expect me to bring my camera because I'm the photographer, right? And it becomes almost burdensome. And it's not that you don't love making photos. It's not that you don't want to capture the memories with your friends and family. It's that there's more to creating a photo than just making a snapshot to those of us that are maybe more serious about it. And this is actually another topic I want to talk a little bit about. Maybe if you guys are interested in that, let me know. But the idea of like snapshots versus taking the time. But we're going to assume that most of us that are, fairly serious about photography are going to want to take the best possible pictures, and people are going to expect the best possible pictures, right? If you go to a party and you bring a small camera with no flash and it's a dark party, there's not really much going on there, and the pictures aren't great, that you're not going to feel good about that as a photographer, as someone who's known as like the group's photographer, right? I mean, they're asking you to do that because they're expecting that they're going to get really good pictures. So there's definitely an expectation there that when we go places, that's going to be the case. You go on vacation and people are like, oh, I'd love to see your photos because they know you're a photographer. They think you're going to make a lot of photos, right? This kind of stuff. And again, if you love doing travel photos or you love shooting portraits at parties and stuff, that's fantastic. But if you are, let's say, just a photographer that likes to do more staged portraits, or you're a photographer who likes to shoot food or architecture or something else, that's not exactly the thing that you're doing that day, it can be a bit of a burden. It can feel like it's work, and you don't want it to feel like work. You're going there to have a good time. And even if you do feel compelled on your own without people putting pressure on you to do it, sometimes after the fact, it might not feel like you really got to really enjoy the thing that you saw. And I speak from a personal experience here. I used to bring my camera everywhere. I would go to concerts. I'd go to festivals. I'd go to art shows. I would go, street fairs. I would always have a camera, always trying to shoot. And what I realized was I love shooting photos, and I love walking around, let's say a street fair and making photos. But to me, that's me doing street photography. That's not me enjoying the street fair, which is a totally different thing. And I think that it's interesting that many of us fall into that category where we're going to kind of put off the thing that we actually kind of wanted to do, right? We wanted to go to the Renaissance Fair and enjoy the Renaissance Fair and eat a giant turkey leg and do that. But instead, we go to the Renaissance Fair and we photograph the people in the various costumes and stuff, which is fun in and of itself. But you could just go out any day and make photos, right? You could go down the street and do that. Here you went with your family to the Renaissance Fair. You want to be enjoying that together. So this is where balance comes in. And it's really sometimes hard to see that we're even doing this until we really look back and reflect on it. I remember for me, I had gone to a concert, and it was before they had such big restrictions. And I took with me a 200 millimeter lens, and I'm there, in the back, shooting these pictures. And I was showing the pictures after to people. And then they were like, oh, what songs did they play? And only remembered a handful of the songs. Like, I mean, obviously I heard them, I was there, but I was so focused. The ones that I remembered were the ones that had the good pictures of. I was like, oh yeah, this was when they were playing blah, blah song. But like, I didn't, it was actually Weird Al Yankovic, so I could tell by the way he was dressed. So that's probably why I knew. But in any case, Weird Al is an amazing concert. I recommend it highly, but that's beside the point. But I realized, I was like, wow, you know what? Like, I went to this concert, which was really fun, obviously, and I enjoyed taking the pictures, but I focused so much on taking the pictures that I really didn't even get to fully enjoy this concert. And then, fortunately, within a short period of time, they came back in town, and that time I did not bring a camera. And it was awesome. I really enjoyed it. I had moments, of course, when I was there where I was like, oh, I wish I had my camera. But overall, I really enjoyed it. And I realized, you know, sometimes you got to put down the camera and enjoy what's going on around you. This isn't always the case, of course. I mean, like I said, I love making photos. So for me, my compromise ended up being with getting a smaller, more compact camera. Now, these days I use my phone. The phone has a great camera in it. I've got the whatever phone that has the 3 lenses, and I can take all kinds of pictures with it. It's totally cool. There's phone apps you can control. You should even shoot in RAW if you really want to. So you can get a little bit more fancy with it if you want. I'll often bring maybe with a drone with me if I'm flying places where that's allowed. And I also have a really cool 360 camera. So why do I use that versus, let's say, bring my nice Nikon or Canon or Sony camera with me? Because when I'm shooting with my 360 camera, it doesn't feel like work. There's really not much I can do, minor adjustments only, and it's just a silly, fun thing. I mean, obviously some people use 360 cameras for work, but I don't. For me, it's just a fun little gadget that I have. And people are always like, oh, what's that? I don't have to think too much about it. I can just take it out. It's the 360 camera, catches everything, right? And you can take some really fun pictures with it. So what I've done is I've found a way that I can enjoy photography as a different thing, right? I'm not there with my quote professional cameras trying to make the same level, the same type of pictures I make when I'm doing work. Instead, it's a completely different hobby. I'm using a different device. I'm using a drone in areas where that's allowed, and making cool aerial videos or shots. I'm using the 360 camera if I'm like walking around the streets, and if I have to just grab a shot of like me with my family or me with my friends, I can do a quick shot with the phone. This also helps a lot when you want to hand your phone to somebody versus when we used to have to hand our, when you hand your nice camera, you hand somebody nowadays mirrorless cameras a little easier, but you hand them a camera that's got this long lens on it and they don't know what to do with it and they're all confused. Try handing somebody a Leica. They're so used to autofocus and everything. You're trying to explain to them how to focus it. The phone is so much better, right? So really what we end up with is the idea that I can do both things, but I have to really think about it. I have to tell myself, I'm going to this event, this party, this vacation, this tour, that I'm doing, this vineyard tour, to enjoy the vineyard tour. And any photos that I make will be just memories that I'm going to keep for myself. They don't need to be award-winning photos I'm going to hang on the wall. This allows me to separate it. It worked for me. I don't know what works for you guys. Maybe you don't have this issue. I'd love to know if people are just like, no, I love to bring my most professional camera all the time, and I don't mind that I spend the whole time, getting everything exactly right, the perfect composition. And again, that might be another, call in and we'll talk about that a bit. But I'm going to go into the assumption that a lot of people are like me, and basically they're going, oh man, I don't want to have to be the photographer and always take the pictures every single time. And, I don't want to feel obligated to do this. So you can do it in a way by making yourself effectively a kit. I'm not saying to buy a bunch of gear, but hey, buy gear. That is a fun thing that you can be when people are like, hey, you're going to take a picture of the photographer? Sure. I have this cool 3D camera, the 360 camera. And I'll tell you what, people love it. They're like, oh, I've never seen anything like that before. It's really cool. So, stuff like that is really cool. Knowing how to use something you have with you already, like your phone, is really cool. Learning the panoramas and stuff, because you can still do creative stuff and still be able to push the limits of what you're doing without feeling burdened to being the photographer. Because sometimes it's nice just to live in the moment. It's always great to capture the moment, especially later when you're trying to remember, but sometimes it's nice just to live in it. And again, I say this for people that also do, you do a lot of social media, you've got a following, whatever. Take your pictures, do your quick story, but make sure that you're not spending all your time doing that. Try to balance that out, because balance is really the key. You will get burned out as a creative if you never allow yourself to do other things. If all you're doing is focusing on the creative endeavor, which we often do, especially when it's new to us, because we're so like, yes, 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 it can burn you out. And you want to, it's much easier to kind of prevent yourself from being burnt out than it is to recover from being burnt out. I mean, has anybody been really burnt out? I would love to hear from you guys if you've had like burnouts where you're like, I'm not shooting again. And then, of course, hopefully got back to it. I mean, I know people who have stopped shooting because they shot like so much all the time. And then eventually it kind of became a point where they just didn't want to anymore. They literally don't take pictures anymore, even to the extent of they barely take a picture with their phone. So, hopefully you don't want to reach that point. So what we want to do is think about the idea that when we are doing things that are supposed to be fun, there's something that's not the photography. And I'm not saying photography isn't fun, obviously. They're not meant to be that. You're going on this trip to do a wine tasting. So you're there to taste wine and to enjoy it and to walk around the vineyard and see things. You're not necessarily there to make the most perfect picture of the bubbles of the wine or the way as it's poured into the glass and the reflection of the thing. I mean, if you see that, cool. But in the end, you'll probably be just as happy with a shot on your phone of something like that than you will bringing a giant camera bag that you have to set up and do all kinds of stuff. And also, keep in mind that when you're at this vineyard and you see this cool pour with the wine glass, you can make your snapshot to remember it like a journal. And then later, when you're back, in your photography mode, you can buy yourself a bottle of wine, get yourself a wine glass, and do some awesome shots. They'll probably be as good, if not better, because you'll be able to actually set it up and do it, repeat it over and over again, try it. You've learned a new technique. You've got something else to do. It's another part of your hobby, and it didn't take away from your moments in those spaces, because we need to have some separation. When we are artists or creators, it's always with us, right? It's not like when I was younger, I had a job. I used to load, that was in a shipping department, basically. We would load trucks and with effectively cardboard boxes that were full of stuff. And when I left that place at night, I didn't go home and load boxes in my closet or in my car, right? That was the job. It was separate, right? When we're a creator, especially if we do it for money, we never get away from it, because ideally you love creating, right? So you're creating in your studio or wherever you do it. You're at weddings shooting, and then when you're home, you're shooting, and you're going on vacation, you're shooting, and you're always doing the things, and it can lead to burnout. So we want to really separate that. And I found personally for me, it helps for me to do a different type of photography, a different way. In this case, I'm talking about using a different type of camera, but a different type of camera changes the way that I'm shooting, right? I'm shooting with the 360 camera. It's going to have a totally different effect. I'm using the drone. That's like really fun because I'm flying it. Make sure you get your drone registered and everything, and you're only flying where you should, of course. But, you're doing these things. So it's different, but it's the same. So you still get to be a creator. You still get to enjoy it, and you're not feeling obligated. And, if you feel like that family or friends or whatever often put pressure on you to be the photographer, and you don't like that because you're not really enjoying the thing you're supposed to be doing, then honestly, it just takes a little bit of honesty, right? And just say, listen, I don't want to bring my camera to this party because I just want to enjoy it. Obviously, don't tell them last minute because that's not very nice either if somebody is expecting something, but, set boundaries. It's important. You need to have space and to enjoy things beyond being the personal photographer of your family or the personal videographer or whatever. And then when the time comes where you want to do that, it's a family reunion, you don't see each other very often, when you're going to get together, then you can tell people ahead of time, hey guys, I'm bringing my camera and we're going to make a picture, and I can do it on my own terms. And I'm not feeling obligated that I have to do it. Most of the time, I'm living my life. I'm enjoying it. I'm doing the things I want to do. But every once in a while, when the time comes, I'm going to do the photography. I'm going to bring you guys in. I'm going to make an amazing family photo for everybody. But don't expect it all the time. And I think that's completely reasonable to say to somebody, I don't think it's a problem. I mean, I'm curious of how much pressure people feel to have to do that. Maybe you just love doing it. I mean, again, if you just love bringing your camera with you everywhere, then that's great. Obviously I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but I do think there's a difference. And I feel like, and I've had enough conversations with enough photographers to know that this is not an uncommon thing, that oftentimes we feel obligated to shoot pictures at parties and things like that, or a friend's wedding, or, anything, because people just assume, hey, you like photography, you're going to want to do this. And I'm not talking about the whole, like, You want that? You can pay me. I don't know where that voice came from, but you know what I'm talking about. That's a whole different thing. I'm not talking about you should ask for money. Money's a whole other topic. If you enjoy shooting and, they're your family and stuff and whatever, I would take the tact of you either want to shoot it and you do it or you don't. I'm not one to tell my cousins, I'll only bring my camera if you pay me, because that feels a little weird, but maybe you have a different relationship with your cousins. I don't know. To me, I think business and pleasure should be kept at least on some level separate. And if you are going to do something that is for yourself, it's vacation, it's a trip, it's a day off, don't feel obligated to shoot. That being said, if you are going to shoot when you're there, try to do something different. Change it up a little bit so it doesn't feel like a burden. Instead of bringing your full kit of Sonys with all your different lenses, just bring some kind of small camera or some other optional thing that you can bring with you and challenge yourself in a different way. Can I still make cool portraits with just my phone? Can I make a family portrait with a 360 camera or with a panoramic camera? Maybe I'll shoot instant film, or maybe I'll shoot with a smaller camera, more like a point and shoot camera, or my phone. What I'm saying is, in order to avoid this whole, are we doing it for fun or are we doing it for work? Try to make some separation between those two with your approach to it. That works for me. What works for you guys? Let me know if any of you had this type of situation or how you overcome it. If you're in that situation, I'd love to hear from you guys. Go ahead, call in, and let's discuss it. This week's review is from Wentoman on Apple Podcasts, Germany. Learn everything about photography. I don't listen to podcasts at all. Daniel is my first and maybe only podcaster I listen to because I know it's worth it. It's Daniel. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks so much for all the great reviews. If you haven't had a chance to rate and review the podcast, please do so. And if you review the podcast, I will read it here on the air. There was a bit of an interesting discussion going on Twitter and Facebook and such about the last couple episodes, but no direct messages here. If you guys do want to send a message, I'll give you information about that at the end of the show. There was a Facebook response that I wanted to read here because I thought it was kind of interesting. It's from Steve. It requires a little bit of ego to keep striving to get better at your craft. Too much and you hold yourself back. It can be difficult to know exactly where that line is at times. And I think that's exactly right. When we are creators and we are thinking we can do this, we can create something that people enjoy, we can make a living out of this, or we can do it in a way that will make people enjoy it. That does take some ego, right? A lot of people might doodle in their notebooks, right? But very few people make a painting and display it in public. So same is true for photography and video or any of that. It takes a bit of ego, a bit of pride, if you want, to put your work forward, thinking that it is of high enough caliber that people will enjoy it. And then that is the positive end of it, right? But there's also this idea that if you have too much ego, like I'm really good, I don't care what you say, that can be a negative. So this balance is super important. And I think this comes down to things I've talked about before. Having peer groups is really important, interacting with others, because that will hopefully help keep it in check, right? When you are interacting with others, and I mean on a true level, not this kind of surface level. I know a lot of photographers kind of on Twitter thing, but people that you actually interact with and have real conversations with, people that you actually, open yourself up to where they can understand where you're coming from, and you might not feel you have to put a wall up so that they don't think, oh, well, this person's not doing so well, those kind of people. So it's good to have them in our life, and maybe that's another topic for another day, but I thought this was an interesting point, and let me know what you guys think about that. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to hear your voice on the show, you can leave me a message any number of ways. You could use the Anchor app. There will be a link in the show notes /description. You could send me an email, adaramavoice@gmail.com. You could either type it out and I'll read it for you, or you could attach a voice message. I'm also on the Adorama Discord. There's a room there for a voice. Check me out there. Send me a message. Let's chat. You can reach me on all the social platforms. All these things will be in the show notes if you want to reach out and have your voice on the show. Also, don't forget to rate the show and give me a review if you can, and I will read a review every week. And I'll talk to you soon.